Last week, we learned that molecules and other materials move through cell membranes, but not everything does. Today, we're going to learn exactly how that happens. There are several different ways that molecules can move through a cell membrane. These are processes. They each have their own name, and we're going to learn what they are. Things have to go through a cell membrane in both directions. Take a look here. If you watch this animation and you look at the side, you see things moving through. This is a blood vessel, an artery or a vein inside your body that carries red blood cells, like you see moving past. But other materials, other molecules have to be able to go through that blood vessel as well. So you can see things have to go through the cell membrane. And remember, the blood vessel or the artery or the vein is made of cells. And all of this has to happen in molecule form, really, really small groups of atoms. Some things that go through cell membranes include gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, liquids like water, and solids like glucose and waste. So today we are learning about several types of transport. Passive transport. This type of transport is not active. It doesn't require any energy. There are several types. Diffusion is a passive transport. Osmosis is a passive transport. And then something called facilitated diffusion is also a passive transport. And then there's active transport. This kind does require energy. Types of active transport include endocytosis and exocytosis. Before we can talk about how molecules move through cell membranes, we need to understand the term concentration gradient. You've looked at this in assignments before. Concentration means the number of items in one area. Think of concentration gradient like a slide. The top of the slide represents a high concentration, like there are a lot of people in one area. The bottom of the slide, since it's closer to the ground, represents a low concentration, or only a few things, molecules, people, in one area. Going down the slide doesn't require any energy. If you climb up to the top of a slide on a playground and you sit there and you give yourself a little push, it doesn't require any energy to keep going down the slide. But going up the slide, however, does require energy. You know you have to put in a little bit of effort to climb up the slide. So let's talk about passive transport. If you take a look at this animation, this gives you an example of passive transport. This is diffusion happening. And then if we take a look here, what is the concentration level in each side of the chamber? You can take a look at the number of molecules that each side of the chamber shows. On the left side, it's a high concentration. On the right side, it's a low concentration. So if we remove this green wall, what do you think will happen? Once the wall is removed, the things from the high concentration should go to the low concentration. And you can see that the molecules spread out until they are equal, called equilibrium. Passive transport doesn't require any energy from the cell, it just happens. One type of passive transport is diffusion. During diffusion, molecules go from high to low concentration. This means they're going down the slide, and if you think about going down the slide, that does not require any energy. Diffusion happens for small molecules, molecules that are only made of a few atoms, like oxygen and carbon dioxide. Diffusion keeps happening until equilibrium is reached. Once you have equal numbers on both sides, that doesn't mean the molecules stop moving. It simply means they move in equal numbers back and forth across the cell membrane. Another type of passive transport is osmosis. Osmosis follows the exact same rules as diffusion, except that osmosis is specifically talking about water molecules. Water molecules go from high to low concentration. Again, if you think about the slide, that does not require any energy. You're going down the slide from the high end to the low. And osmosis continues until equilibrium is reached, which means there's the same amount of water on both sides of the cell membrane. It sounds like diffusion because it is a type of diffusion. Take a look here at the power of osmosis. Here you see a plant, and that plant hasn't been watered for a while, and you can see what's happened to all of the stems and the leaves of the plant. They've kind of wilted. If you remember back when we talked about plant cells, we know that the plant cell has to be filled with a large amount of water to keep the plant's leaves upright and sturdy and standing up tall like they should be. So once we place this plant in some water, take a look at what happens. You can see that as the plant's cells, as the cells that make up the stems and the leaves fill up with water, it causes the plant to not be wilted anymore. It causes the plant to stand up nice and tall. Another video about osmosis is listed above this presentation in your Blackboard assignment. It's called the Osmosis Wrap. Definitely take a chance and check that out. Now let's talk about facilitated diffusion. Facilitated means it has to be helped a little bit. In this case, molecules are still going from high to low concentration, but they need a carrier protein. This is the cell membrane on either side here. Remember, it's made up of two layers of lipid molecules. In between those layers, there are things called carrier proteins. Those carrier proteins do the job of changing shape when certain materials kind of get in their way. They can act like a tunnel. One of these molecules that needs facilitated diffusion, it needs a little help to get through the cell membrane, is glucose. And you're going to find out that glucose is really important to the study of cellular respiration and photosynthesis. And again, no energy is required from the cell to carry out this process. Here's facilitated diffusion in action. You can see once the glucose molecule, the red dot, approaches the carrier protein, it changes shape and allows the molecule through. Now let's talk about active transport. Everything we've talked about so far is passive transport. You can see in this animation that active transport is a little different. What does it show that we haven't seen before? That's right, it shows some form of energy being needed for the process to happen. Active transport is called active because energy is required. Think about being active. When you're outside running around or riding your bike, when you're being active, you're using energy. In this case, the molecules go from low to high. They go up the slide. You can see they start out in a high number over here, and they move to inside the cell, where there must be more of them not being shown. This process is used for either really big molecules that have to go through the cell membrane or molecules that have a charge. A charge kind of works like a magnet. If you have two magnets that are facing the same way, then they repel each other. That's kind of like what a charged molecule does when it comes in contact with another charged molecule. Things that go through the cell membrane using active transport are sodium, which is charged, and big waste molecules. Another form of active transport is endocytosis. Endocytosis is this process going on over here, and exocytosis is going on over here. Let me back up and show you those again. These processes are used to either get rid of waste or take in really big molecules around the outside of the cell. So here you see the cell membrane actually forms a circle around whatever's supposed to come in, or the cell membrane merges or becomes part of the outside cell membrane and lets things out. That's what endocytosis and exocytosis look like. So this presentation defines the types of molecule movement processes that you need to know. So as a review, we have passive transport processes like diffusion, osmosis, and facilitated diffusion. And then we have active transport processes like active transport, endocytosis, and exocytosis. If you have any questions, please make sure you send me a message.